Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group bi-weekly meeting. It is August 17th, 2017. I'm Patrick Rogers, and I'll be hosting this week's call as usual. So real quick, for folks who might be new to the call or new to watching the recordings, the JavaScript Special Interest Group exists in the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program, and we're focused more on client-side development generally, and more specifically on SharePoint Framework, as that's rolling out and developing, and as well as the JavaScript core library, which we've been building as a team over the last year and change. That's been being developed. So we focus on those things and sort of anything generally around client-side development. We sort of push that out. And the goal there is to provide a little bit more focus out of the monthly calls, which are very broad and really can't cover anything too specific, simply because the amount of material inside patterns and practices each month. So we started these special interest groups. You're watching the client-side development one. There's also, of course, the PowerShell and CSOM core library special interest group. So check that out as well. You're, of course, welcome to attend as many or as few of these patterns and practices meetings as you would like, and we're always happy to see you when you can attend. So 2 links down there on the bottom of the slide. The first is to the SPFx-community. That's going to take you to the Microsoft Tech community, and that's the replacement for the old Yammer site, and that's our sort of public forum where you could ask questions of both folks from Microsoft, but there's a great community there of just people helping people, which is always fantastic. So that's a great place to ask general development questions, whether it's client-side development or just any type of SharePoint development you might be interested in. Do check that out. It's a great place, great forum to get involved, and if you've got some time, you can help out by answering some questions from folks as well. The second link there, dev.office.com/SharePoint, is your one-stop shop for all things SharePoint development. So if you want to get into the SharePoint framework, you haven't tried it out yet, check out that link. It's a great place to start. There's a lot of great tutorials and walkthroughs, and you'll be able to sort of pick that up, and it'll walk you through getting started from, the very zero, from never having done anything to get started to get your first SharePoint framework web part. And then as well, of course, if you're working on add-in development, SharePoint like provider-hosted add-ins, or if you're doing sort of the classic solution package development, all our resources are moving to dev.office.com/SharePoint. So they're not all necessarily there yet, but we're working on getting everything there, and eventually that will be the place to go. So jumping in, what's on the agenda for today? We've got a quick update on the JavaScript core component. We've got some SharePoint framework latest news, which it might be for me. We'll see if Vesa can make it on the call today. He's been having some communication issues. And then we've got some demos. So again, the Vesa demo may or may not happen depending on his ability to get onto the call. I've got a quick demo on the cache expiration handling that was just added in 2.0.8 that was released yesterday. I want to show that and talk through that a little bit. That'll be 5 or 10 minutes. And then Ryan is going to have a demo on creating your own Yeoman generator. So that's not necessarily SharePoint framework specific or SharePoint specific even, but it's a great resource to understand how Yeoman works and how to create your own generator, which is, if you have sort of internal processes and you want to have a sort of a quote-unquote project template with a client-side solution, whether that's SharePoint framework or something else, Yeoman is a great way to do that, and Ryan's going to walk us through how to create your own generator. And then if we have time at the end, we'll have a little bit of open discussion as always. So jumping right in, always want to remind folks of opportunities to participate both in this call and the larger Patterns and Practices program. You can demo a SharePoint Framework web part on this call, demo something related to the core library, or demo something really just related to client-side development in general. We'd love to have you demo on the call. We'd love to have the demos. So if you have something, everybody's working on cool stuff. If you want to show that off, just get in touch and we'll make some time for you on an upcoming call. I think it's a great way for the community to learn from each other and for folks to get a chance to show off the cool work they're doing, because I know every time I see these demos, I'm kind of wowed by the neat stuff folks are doing out there. And it's stuff I would maybe not necessarily ever have thought of myself, so it's always cool to see that, and it's a great way to learn from each other. You can contribute on GitHub, whether that's to the JavaScript core library or any of the patterns and practices solutions. That's a great way to get involved. And contributing can mean submitting pull requests. It can mean submitting issues. It can also mean helping out on issues. If somebody has a question and you happen to know the answer, it's a great way to jump in and maybe you can answer that person's question and get them working, get them back to being productive, which is always a great way to help out. And then as always, we're always open to feedback. And looking for that feedback from folks, because it helps us make both the JavaScript stuff, the client-side focused stuff, but all of the patterns and practices and the SharePoint dev ecosystem work better. So if you have ideas or have feedback, try and frame it in a positive way. We always more positive feedback, but do let us know. We always do want to hear from folks out there in the community about how we can make things better and easier as we move forward. So quick update on the JavaScript core component. As a lot of you know who are on the last call or maybe watched the last recording, I was out for a little bit on some family leave. So I'm back, and that means we got the JavaScript core component 2.08 was released yesterday, August 16th. Put the date there for folks that might be watching this later in the future. That's got some fixes and additions. Nothing major, but some good fixes in there, I think. We had a couple issues that were reported that we were able to resolve. And then as well, I want to show, we'll do in the demo, the cache expiration handling. I want to kind of show that off and talk through that a little bit. My focus for the next couple of weeks is going to be graph. I know I've talked about that on and off for a while now, but I'm going to put a real focus onto that to get some initial work from that into the 2.09 release. We are having some internal discussions here on the PNP core team around supporting taxonomy. This has been a big ask for a very long time, and it looks like we're not necessarily going to get REST API, like underscore API support for taxonomy anytime in the predictable future. So we're having a discussion around if and how we might support that through the VTI bin services. So that's just in the discussion phase. That's something we certainly welcome feedback on. I know that's been a big ask of folks for a long time. So we're starting those discussions. You're likely not going to see that in 2.09, but we're having those discussions and we'll see what we come up with, and we will definitely keep everybody updated. But I think that could be a great addition to help folks and enable some new scenarios that I know are very desired. And then just to say, 2.09 is going to be targeted for September 20th. So that's just the date. So if you have issues to report or want to try and get a pull request of your own in by September 20th, that's going to be kind of the target release date. So kind of keep that in mind. And I have created a milestone in GitHub so you don't have to just remember that date. You can always check on that.
Okay, thank you. You need to help me because I can't see the slides, but obviously I open up the presentation. This is pretty awkward, but I for a reason or another, I can't get into the Skype. So my badge still seems to work, so that's not an issue. Anyway, so I need that joke. So quickly on the things, my first slide is around the tenant-wide deployment options. So like you guys probably seen in the social media, hopefully, last week in Wednesday, I think Wednesday PT timeframe, it was actually after midnight for me, we released the tenant-wide deployment option for SharePoint Framework Solutions. And this is really, just to be super clear on this one, it is mentioned in the PMP short video where we demonstrate this one as well. But this works across all of the different SharePoint Framework component types. So client-side web parts, extensions, it is a solution level setting. Now, if it's a web part and you enable the setting in the solution level, it means that the web part is automatically available in the modern web part picker or in the classic page, automatically available, so you're able to see that. If we are talking about an extension, that means if you enable this, that extension which is in the solution, will be available for the site, but unless the extension is associated to a field or a user custom action in a list or in a site level, it won't be visible and executed. And that was the thing what I was planning to demonstrate today, but unfortunately, I can't understand why. I can't get into the Skype across any of my devices. So it seems to be quite weird situation from that perspective. But we can actually do a quick demo on the next one if needed, just to demonstrate, for example, how to enable application customizer through this process as well. It is mentioned, like already covered, in the PMP short video in the YouTube, which is around 8 minutes, so that's relatively fast to check as well. Now, on other stuff, so let's actually move on to the following slide.
Real quick, Vesa, you got a question. Will this come as part of Feature Pack 2?
It is absolutely planned to be part of the Feature Pack 2, or it should be shipped to the on-premises as well. So this is kind of SharePoint framework general capability. So it will be shipped to on-premises version as well.
Great, and you're on the next slide.
Excellent. So next slide, we wanted to actually show you or give you a small treat for joining the call, even though I can't actually see who's on the call, which is kind of awkward. But anyway, so SharePoint Framework Extensions release candidate, it is coming up pretty soon. And after that, we are hitting GA. So we'll have a release candidate based on the current plan relatively soon, in between now and before the GA. But to be super clear on this one, our existing preview, unfortunately, we've been forced to do some API level changes. We obviously will provide you the documentation, we'll update all of the existing tutorials, and we'll go through the samples and all of that to make sure that they work within the release candidate. So if you've worked anything on the preview release, you will actually get broken because we've been making some API level changes based on the feedback what the community has been providing us. But after this, when the release candidate is out, then after a while, we're heading to the GA. Now, let's go to the following slide, which is listing slightly more on the release candidate, what are we planning to do with that one. So, like mentioned, a release candidate will be available relatively soon. I can't say you the date because the reality is that things might still be shifting and moving. So I don't want to actually promise anything unless we actually have a definite date. And typically, we can lock down the date like 24 hours before we go live. So obviously, we have plans, but I can't share them for the time being. Release candidate will be available in the developer accounts, so we're still in the same status from that perspective. So you need to do testing and validation still in the developer tenant. When we go to the GA, it will be then available in the first release and normal tenants. Release candidate is not ready for production use, should be kind of given, but it gives you already pretty close indication on the capabilities which will be available in the general availability. And really the main purpose of this one is that to get a final feedback from the community around these capabilities using the standard feedback process in the SPDevDocs issue list. So we get actually final verification that the things are looking fine, and then obviously the GA doesn't mean that we won't be evolving that after that, but this is version 1.0, which we will be supporting, and we won't be breaking you, and then we keep on adding capabilities and features as well. There is no public ETA for general availability at this point. The last line is there just to kind of, this is classic story around anything within the Microsoft or anything within the SharePoint/Office perspective. So you can pretty easily have a look on calendars for upcoming big conferences where any announcement could be done. So personally, not denying or confirming anything here from a scheduling perspective. Whatever are your conclusions, they are your conclusions. So no ETA for time being for GA, but keeping you kind of up to date on what's happening. Good. Let's go to the following slide, and then we can check if there's any comments on the IM window. If Patrick will be my eyes. Patrick, slide number 11.
You're there.
Thank you. It's good to have a great assistant for making this slide. Cool. Things what SharePoint engineering is working on. So this is something what I added on the slides back in the mid-June, just to make sure that people are aware of what we're working on. Obviously, the SharePoint framework extension, that is our major release. So that is our major or the biggest thing what we're actually working on. The second thing there, automatic solution deployment, this refers to the tenant scope deployment, and that has been now shipped with the last Wednesday's release of SharePoint framework. We're still looking into additional ALM APIs and all of that stuff in the future as well, but this is already giving great tooling to get your web part available, for example, across the tenant, if that's what you want to do. We're also looking to have a site collection app catalog. So that means that if the tenant admin approves and you want to do this, you are able to do site collection scope app catalogs in the future. So you don't actually need to deploy your stuff in a tenant level. You're able to target your web parts and extensions in a smaller scope. For example, for sub-testing first and then go wider scope, or it might be that your web part is targeted to a one site collection and you don't want to actually get it visible across all of the things. This is the tool for that. Obviously, on-premises support for SPFx, which will be in the SharePoint 2016 feature pack 2. I do not have a schedule for that one because it's completely different people who are running the show for that one. Graph HTTP client, we're working on updates on that one, additional scopes, additional capabilities, additional ways of accessing graph things in an easily possible way, so you don't have to use ADAL.js for that. And also the dialog control is absolutely available as part of the capabilities, which will be then packaged as part of the SharePoint framework extension release and heading to GA at some point. Good. I think that's it from my perspective. Any questions, comments for around the SharePoint framework? I do apologize on this technical challenges. But...
Yep, a couple of questions. One, for field customizers, will edit overrides be available prior to GA?
Good question. I can't confirm or deny on that one right now. So we'll see if we can actually make that one for this particular GA. It is absolutely within our backlog.
Okay, and one more. Are the connected web parts still in private beta?
Connected web parts, unfortunately, are still in, let's say, unannounced beta. Technically, the capability is kind of there available, but we don't want to announce that even for preview or provide a significant amount of documentation until we can lock down those APIs. And the reason why this happened was simply because we needed to ship our resources and concentrate on getting the extensions properly finalized, so we're able to ship that one out, and then we'll get back on the web part connections. I do understand that back in Build in May, in the session with me and Dan Kogan, we actually announced web part to web part communications, but then we pulled it back from the release, and I do apologize on that mistake. It is once again one of these resourcing challenges and priorities, and somebody with a much higher paycheck made a decision around let's delay that one and let's make that one happen after the extensions are actually out.
Oh, one more question just snuck in before we move on. Any updates coming to the generator to include additional functionality? For example, additional gulp tasks for upload deployment, like the ones on PNP SPDev build extensions section.
Yes, so we're looking into having some of that stuff natively supported in the Yeoman templates, no doubt, which will help in the streamline the development experience. I don't think we'll get them included within the next major release, which will be together with the extensions. But the area where we will concentrate more and more after we get the initial version of extensions out is the streamline development, streamline or improve also the enterprise development cycles and experience, ALM story, all of these automations, debugging experience, and all of them. So that's absolutely within our objectives. Right now, like mentioned, we are really kind of try to drop everything which isn't directly related on the extension, so we can give you guys a solid and well-tested version with the extensions, and then we can start expanding on them.
Great. Thank you, Vesa, for that. So we're going to jump in real quick to the demos. Unfortunately, we're going to have to skip Vesa's demo. We'll do that on the next call, so apologies for that. So let me go ahead and stop sharing and share my screen. This is documented as well, so for folks that haven't checked out the developer guide in the wiki, which is within the GitHub project, so you can go to the wiki tab. We have a developer guide. We've got a lot of different topics here. I'd just like to periodically remind folks we still see a lot of questions come in around stuff that is covered here. So do please check this out if you haven't. We've tried to answer a lot of questions and provide as much documentation as we can. Of course, if something is missing, we'd love to hear about that. But do please have a look here if you haven't. So moving on real quick, we'll jump into the caching section. So you can see now the caching expiration has been added here. So you can see the documentation and revisit this, which basically covers exactly what I'm going to tell you now. So there's two ways to use the new caching expiration stuff. The first is you can explicitly call a new method delete expired, and that exists on both of the caches. So you've got local storage and you have session storage. So you can do a pnp.storage.local.deleteExpired, which returns a promise, and then you can do some additional work, so loading up a page. This might be something you do at the start, like on a page load. You might call delete expired to clear things out that are expired. And this came from an issue that was reported where maybe the cache is filling up, because we do track an expiration, but we're not actively removing things. We're only using the expiration in the past. When you would make a new request, we'd see if the data was stale and then replace it. Now we've provided a way for you to actually explicitly delete these expired things from the cache. This will only touch things that were added through this library. So local storage is going to have however many things in it. We'll only touch things that were added through the PNP storage API, or our little thin wrapper around the browser storage API. So we're not going to touch anything that wasn't put there by us. But this gives you a nice way to explicitly delete things. So you can do that. And then, of course, session also has delete expired. So that will run through and delete any content that is expired in that cache. The other way to use it, and this has a little bit more application in the browser. So we can see here I've got my very beautifully designed site with these wonderful colors. But what I want to show you guys is if we can get into edit mode. And before I do that, let me actually do gulp serve. So we're going to run the library out of the page here. And so if we look here, I just have a script editor web part, and I'm pulling in the PNP.js. But there's two new things in the PNP setup. So if you want to set up a global cache expiration, there's a flag for enable cache expiration, which is going to be set to true if you want that. We're defaulting that to false. So we are not going to do this by default. This is something you would need to enable if you want it. And then you can control the interval that we check the cache for expired items. This is in milliseconds, so I'm saying every 10 seconds, let's check that cache for any expired items. Then you're going to see here, this is just to make the sample work so you can have a look at this. I'm subscribing the console listener. I'm setting our log level to info. And then I'm making two requests. These aren't very exciting. I'm just getting web and getting all the lists. But I'm using caching to stick those into the cache. So I'm going to hit cancel. And I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to hit F12. And let me stop this and refresh the page and then bring this back. And so we can see here, we're going through and we've actually removed some items from the cache because they were expired for me previously making sure this demo works. And we've got them from the cache. And then you can see we're actually coming in and these are then getting removed from the cache because they've expired. And if we wait, that was another 10 seconds, and we've removed now both of our entries from the cache. So if I hit F5, this time you'll see these values were not found in the cache when we went to go get them on a subsequent request. And then you'll see here in another 10 seconds, these things will be removed. There you go. That's sort of the cache expiration handling that was added in the library. I do want to point out about this, the way this is implemented is using set timeout. So if we look here at our handler, this is using set timeout. So something to keep in mind is there's no real advantage to checking the cache super frequently to see if things are expired. And in fact, I wouldn't even recommend really enabling this unless your page application is sort of a long-running one-page app that's going to sit there for a long time doing many, many requests without reloading the page. I would really sort of recommend kind of the on-page load, just go ahead and clear out any expired items that might be there, and then let, handle that on each page load one time for performance reasons. But if you do have a long-running application, we did want to enable a way for you to sort of set and forget that this cache expiration would be running in the background. So do keep that in mind as a performance thing, just something to have in the back of your head. We have put a hard limit that the minimal expiration interval is going to be 300 milliseconds. We can argue about that, but if you want something more frequent, you can write your own wrapper around this. It's not that complicated, so you can actually sort of just copy this code, and you could make this every 1 millisecond if you'd like. But there's no real advantage to that, so keep that in mind. And this is really only something to worry about if you're seeing a lot of cache storage pressure. So you're starting to fill that up, and you're starting to get exceptions around too much stuff in that storage cache, whether it's session or local. So just something to keep in mind there. So that's the talk through that. Let's look real quick. Are there any questions here? Nope. Great. So Ryan, if you are ready to take over, and you would like to start your demo here on the creating your own Yeoman generator. Sorry, brain took a little bit of a minute off there. But just a quick reminder while Ryan's kind of getting spun up here, do check out the wiki. Really encourage you to sort of check this out. You can contribute here as well. So don't, if you see something missing, you can always add an issue, or you can contribute an article or update an existing article as you like. Ryan, you ready to go?
Sweet. All right, so just a little bit about me. My name is Ryan Scouten. I'm a senior architect and evangelist at Zact. I've been working with JavaScript for just a few years now. Spend my time traveling the country and working with different people on things. And so one of the problems that I ran into is a lot of times getting people started at our company, getting them set up with the basic setup. So when we're talking, whether we're talking doing a project with React, or just straight JavaScript, getting all these standard practices and things we have set up took a little bit of setup trying to get new people in there. So when we started the SharePoint framework released using the Yeoman generator, I had the idea, I was like, hey, wait a minute, I can create my own, and it'll make life a lot easier to be able to get people started started on a new project. And they've got all the right tools and everything set up, and they're just ready to go. They don't have to worry about those issues. So to do that, luckily, Yeoman makes generators very easy to create. So if we're creating our own Yeoman generator, it is extremely simple with Node.js. There we have two ways of doing this. We can manually create our project structure and everything that we need, or the Yeoman team has actually included a Yeoman generator. So that will set up the template for you and get you started off and running. Pretty cool, other than it's a lot more bloated and a lot of extra files that you may not necessarily need. So in my demo that I'm going to be showing, I started out with just creating it manually, and it's a lot more slim. So, all right, so some of the key concepts. Yeoman expects every generator that you're going to be using to start with generator dash. So if you're creating one, you have to have it generator dash so it knows to iterate as it's looking through all of your globally installed NPM modules your node modules, that it'll know to find, okay, this is a generator, I need to show it. So when you're creating it, you have to create it in a folder and a project with this generator dash whatever your generator is going to be called. Also, all generators that you're going to be creating, because you can add multiple generators and pieces and kind of combine them together, but they have to be inside a generator subfolder inside your project. And inside there, the default generator, if you don't specify anything else, has to be under an app folder. If you do not, and you try running your generator, it'll say it can't find it. So you have to keep that in mind. Also, the cool thing is we can do a lot of template files. So any files that we're going to be using for templating, and there's some APIs that are given to us to be able to deal with and interact with those files, need to be under your templates folder underneath your generator folder. And once we get into the demo, it'll make a little more sense. Also, if you're manually setting things up, you need to make sure you're adding in the Yeoman generator module, so that way we have everything that we need. Also, the cool thing is once we get into this, in Yeoman, you're setting up a class. So we're just using Node.js code, so we get to use some of the new classes and all the new stuff. But we also, any functions you include in your class will get run. And usually, for the most part, they'll run in order, except for some of the special names, or unless you're changing run order. If you have a method you don't want to run, just start the name of the method with an underscore, and it won't pick that up and run it for you unless you call it explicitly. Also, some of the special lifecycle functions, these are the ones that the Yeoman generator doesn't really care what order they're listed in your class. It will just run them. It'll pull them out and say, okay, run them in this sequence. So for the most part, this will get you most of what you need. So we have initializing, getting things set up, all the basics. Most of the ones that you're probably going to care about is probably prompting, writing, and install. At least the ones I've worked with, that's what we need. And then there's a whole lot more things that we can do that we don't really have enough time to cover in today, but there is a good guide out there on the Yeoman site about creating your own Yeoman template and a lot of the instructions for doing that. All right, so now let's take a look and we'll actually go use one of these. So what I've got set up is I have a folder where I've set up a sample project. So if I go into, if I want to create a directory for this, we'll call this demo. So for example, what I did for our company, we set up a generator. And so we said, okay, yo, Zact. And then part of this, I'll gather up some basic questions that we need to determine which template we want to use and how you're working with it. So first question I asked them is, what do you want to call your project? Because we're going to be creating with that. So I'll stick with the default here. And then we ask them, okay, what versions of SharePoint are you targeting? Now, keep in mind, these questions are all specific just to our process, so you can come up with whatever questions you want. So for this case, I'm going to select Office 365. Authentication domain is used for automated deployments. As you're deploying the code, Office 365, we don't necessarily need that, so I can leave it blank. And then we can also choose what framework we want. I'll just choose React. And also for deployment, we have the dev site URL. So that way it automatically sets up the deployment. So I'm just going to put NA here. All right, now this will go out and run. It's going to go set up the project, and it's fairly simple. So with this is all set up, it created all the project, created the folders for us. So we can see it set up a package JSON file. We've got our gulp file. We have some linting added in, and then we also have some templating files. So actually have a sample to get started with. So if we go look at this particular project, as you can see, starting out, it is fairly simple. So all I have is I have a generators folder with a package JSON, and then inside there we have our app, which we have to have because that's our default, with an index.js file and then a templates folder. So the package JSON file is standard node module JSON, nothing different here. You do have to have the name as generator dash and then whatever you're going to call it from the command prompt in. Also, you'll need a description, so if people can find it if you push it out to npm. Also, keywords has to have Yeoman-generator included in it so that they can find it. And then we also list out, okay, the files. This is where we tell it where all of our generators are. And then, like I said, you just have to have Yeoman-generator to make it work and to get it loaded. So if from there, if we go into our app folder, into index.js. We include the Yeoman generator with a require, and the gist of it is we need to include a module exports, and we don't really need too much. We're just creating a class and we're extending generator. So as you can see here, I have a method that is underscore that's just outputting the logo, and so that will not get called unless I tell it to. And then we have a prompt, our prompting method. So I can tell it output the method, our logo, and then we have a list from the this, which we get from our generator class that we're inheriting. And we say at prompt, and we pass in an array of all the questions that we want to ask. So we have a bunch of different types of things we can do. We can do a regular input. We can do a list of options and pass in all the choices we want to pass in. We can go through all those options, and then when it's done, it gives us back a promise, which will give us back the answers, which is just a JavaScript object based off of the name. So in here, the answers value we get back will have a property for each one of these names that we tell it to give back. So when that's done, I just store them as a property on my generator, so that way I can consume them later. And then if we continue down, we've got some more of private methods. Then we have our main, where I base off of the questions that they've answered. I say, okay, go look what their answers were, and then set up the appropriate methods. Now, the cool thing that we can do this as well is the Yeoman generator allows us to do easy templating. So because we have templates, we have some methods included in that give us the template path, and there's also template root if we want to deal with that as well. So we can copy over files if we use the this.file stream, because it uses an in-memory file stream to do this, and use the copy TPL, copy template method. You tell it where you want, what file you want to copy. So I have, in my template path, I have a file called underscore package-react. And then I tell it, okay, in the destination, put it out there, but we're just going to call it package.json. And then also, I am doing some templating, some sort of replacements into there. And inside the file, there's a token in there that says, okay, we're going to replace title. And so the title gets replaced in the package file with whatever they've entered in. So if we go look at that template file, so package prem. Okay, to do the tokenizing and the replacements, we can just use the less than % equals whatever value is that we're going to be passing in, and then % greater than. So a lot like we were doing outputting in classic ASP and ASP, all those sort of things, similar syntax, and then this will replace that text out for us. Also, there is a copy method that you can run straight. They'll just copy a file over, and in the first parameter from the from, if you pass in a glob, just like we're used to using, if you're using with gulp and all those sort of things, if you pass in a glob, it'll take all of those files that match that pattern and copy them to the destination. So that being said, the destination has to be a directory in order to use that approach. So we have all that set up, and that's what it takes. So if we look at the one that's created through the generator, you can see we have a lot more files in here. We have some config files, some lint files, get attributes, Travis. We have a lot more information, a lot more files that get stored in here. But essentially, we have the same setup. We have our generators, we have our app, templates, and our index.js file. So to show you that, it's kind of, if you install it, you now get a new generator. So if you install the npm install generator-generator, you'll get this option to include and just create a generator. And that's really all there is to it. So if you want to go out and create your own generators, there's a whole lot more documentation about things you can do for compositing a bunch of the generators together. So for example, you could take the existing SharePoint framework Yeoman templates and add on to, if you want to add in, for example, the question was asked about doing your own gulp file tasks to do these sort of things. You could add those on and extend the templates to be able to include that. Granted, the product team is going to add those in, but if in the meantime, if you want to deal with that, you can. So one of the things I've included in as our package file as a requirement. We don't want that one. We want this one. So if we look at our package file, one of the things I tell that we always want to include is we include the SharePoint patterns and practices. So that way, all of our projects, we're going to be using it. Nobody has to figure out, okay, now how do I go install this and set it up? And it's all there. And that's all there is to it. And we're ready to go and get off and running. So are there any questions at the moment? And crickets.
Great stuff, Ryan. Thank you for that. Really great to see. So this is something, folks, I think you can really take and apply as you're developing your own sort of processes in-house and how you're going to work with your projects. I know a lot of folks in the past have created like Visual Studio project templates. This is a great way to do that for yourselves and for your teams within, sort of this client-side development, whether it's SharePoint Framework or whether it's just client-side development in general. This is a great way to do that with Yeoman. So thanks, Ryan. Really great demo. Really appreciate it. And let me bring back the slides. And so now I think we've got a little bit of time for some open discussion. If folks have questions, comments, happy to field those. Where is the source of the Microsoft/SharePoint generator? I do not believe that is public. I don't know, Vesa, if
it is.
It is
hidden in the Visual Studio. Yeah, it's hidden in the Visual Studio Online. It is not public, at least for the time being. We are looking into getting some of that open sourced at some point, but it is not yet the time to do that, unfortunately. So that's the decision.
Okay, any other questions? Great. Well, next meeting is going to be August 31st. We actually get 3 meetings in August. We've got a nice long month here. Hold on to summer a little bit longer. So August 31st, look forward to seeing everybody back here on the call. And so thank you very much. Thank you to Vesa. Thank you, Ryan, for the great demo. And thank you all for attending the call. Look forward to talking to you soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.